Hi. Hi, good afternoon. My name is Ben Adducchio, and I am the author of the book Black Diamond Dreams. Today we're doing a live Q&A about the book, as well as reading from the book, Black Diamond Dreams. I hope that everyone's gotten a chance to look at it at this point. The book is available now on Amazon. There's the cover of the print edition. It's available on Amazon in both ebook as well as the paperback. Today, I'll be reading from the book as well as taking your questions. So, if you have any questions you would like to ask me, please put them in the comment box below. And I'm just scrolling down to see the comment box. So, yes, I would love to answer any and all questions you have about Black Diamond Dreams. First, I'd like to talk a little bit about the book. So, the book is set in the 1940s in West Virginia. And the main character in the book is a man by the name of Pat Arciano. And Pat Arciano is loosely based on my actual grandfather, Pat Adducchio. This is my actual grandfather on the cover of the book, Pat Adducchio. This is a picture of him from the late 1940s when he played baseball. So in the book, the novel essentially is a family portrait of the Arciano family in the 1940s. They lived in a small coal mining town called Monongah, West Virginia, which is a real place. Monongah is in Marion County. It's a very small town now. And there are, at the time the book is set, Monongah was the home of two major coal mining operations. And the Arciano family is employed, the men in the family are employed at one of those coal mines as we begin the novel. And Pat, as we start the book, Pat is 18 years old. He's getting ready to finish high school, and he's expected to go into the coal mines like his dad and all of the men in the family. He's basically expected to go and follow their footsteps, but he doesn't want to do that. Essentially, Pat wants to be a professional baseball player. He's a star athlete at Monongah High School, and he loves playing basketball and baseball. He feels, however, that his best sport is baseball, and that's what he wants to do. He wants to pitch professionally for a Major League Baseball team, and he wants to also play outfield. Those are the positions he plays in baseball. So the book is essentially his story and his journey from finishing high school up until the point where he gets to start playing baseball. And in the meantime, we see World War II enter the picture, and Pat has to basically put his dreams aside to go off and do his part in the war. So that he has a lot of, conflicts and challenges that are placed before him. But um, the the story's central message, really is about following your dreams. That's one of the reasons why I call the book Black Diamond Dreams. And I hope that it resonates with everyone who reads it as a message that it's okay to follow your dreams wherever they take you. And even if you don't achieve your goals and dreams and aspirations, maybe what you do get is better than what you dreamed of in the first place. That's something that I was really striving for with this book. I just want to thank a few people before I begin to read from the book. Christy Dahlgren, who is an outstanding illustrator. She illustrated the cover of the book. I sent her the image, and she did this really beautiful illustration, and she designed essentially what became the book cover. She also designed the cover of my first novel, The Shortage. So I wanted to thank her, Christy, again for collaborating with me on this novel. And I also wanted to thank members of my family, especially my mom, who told me so many different stories about our family from this time period that I incorporated for the book or used creatively to try to, write stories in the book that would be interesting and continue the narrative in a strong way. So I would often ask my mom questions about our family members, my grandparents and their parents, who I never got to meet, and I would ask questions about what the towns were like back then, what she remembered about What movie theaters were in Monongah and Fairmont back then in the 1940s? What nightclubs were there? Where would my grandparents, where would they have gone to eat? Where would they have gone to socialize when they weren't going to church to meet friends? Those were, different details and little nuggets that I wanted to put in the book to make it more accurate and more believable for people. So my mom helped me tremendously in that respect. Also, the Library of Congress has just an incredible treasure trove of photographs, audio recordings, even documents like newspaper clippings that really helped me write about that time period. I learned, for instance, I knew that during the 1940s in the town where the story set, in Fairmont, West Virginia, which is also the town where I grew up, I knew that the town had a streetcar. So a lot of people at that time didn't have cars to get around. It isn't like it is today. So they also didn't really use buses as we might think of today to get around. So they would either hitchhike, walk, or they would take the streetcar, a trolley, so to speak, something that you might see in like today in San Francisco. So I was able to find pictures at the Library of Congress of what the streetcar in Fairmont looked like in the 1940s. And that was really interesting. There was a beautiful photograph that I saw that showed the streetcar, the track going down the main street in Fairmont, in main downtown Fairmont today. And all of the tracks were ripped out in the late 1940s. So if you went to Fairmont, West Virginia today, you would see no indication that there had been a trolley and an entire streetcar system. But there was then. And in fact, near the end of the book, I mentioned that the streetcar is about to be discontinued, which is accurate. The streetcar in Fairmont was discontinued in the late 1940s, in 1947, I believe, or perhaps early 1948, which is discussed a little bit in Black Diamond Dreams. So the Library of Congress was incredibly helpful. Also, the West Virginia Division of Culture and History, which has a lot of documents online, that helped me too. I was able to find death certificates, birth certificates, marriage certificates, all kinds of historic public record documents from that time period in regards to my family. And so I was very, very grateful for their help as well. And if you're from West Virginia, if you have family that grew up in West Virginia, and I know several people do that have read this book, several people have told me about, I lived there. Someone said to me, I lived there until I was 4. And this was really interesting because I didn't know that it was like this back then. If you're from that area, if you grew up in West Virginia and you don't live there now, the West Virginia Division of Culture and History has a really great trove of documents, and you can just Google them and find online access to all kinds of records. So again, having said that, I'm going to just start reading from the book, and I see some people have commented already. Thank you for commenting. But I hope you're able to get access to the live video. I see that you are having some issues signing in. Maybe if you just exit out of your window of your browser and go back in, you'll be able to start watching the video then. So yes, I'm sorry to hear that you're having some issues. But now I'll read from Black Diamond Dreams. To give a little background, in the one section of the book, our protagonist, Pat Arciano, tries out for a semi-professional baseball team, a minor league baseball team in Baltimore, a team you may have heard of, the Baltimore Orioles. Well, in the mid-1940s, I learned, having researched the book, the Baltimore Orioles weren't a major league franchise at that point. They were a minor league team. So they hold, in the novel, open tryouts for players. And Pat, our protagonist, goes to try out. And he makes it through the first round of tryouts. He gets called back to go to a new round of tryouts. And so that's where we find him as we begin the reading today. So having said that, I'll read from Black Diamond Dreams, and I hope you enjoy. When he reached the stadium, he was ordered to go out to the field. Mr. Sullivan and Mutton Chops were waiting there. Pat and 11 other young men walked out to meet them. Along with Mr. Sullivan, there was another man carrying a clipboard. He was dressed in one of the fanciest suits Pat had ever seen. It was black, double-breasted, and it fit him like a glove. Pat had never seen anyone as dashing except in the newsreels at movie theaters. Pat figured this must have been the owner of the team. He could feel the pressure. His stomach started to curdle, and he could feel sweat dripping down his back. This was a man that Pat absolutely needed to impress. "Okay, boys, go ahead and have a seat again in the dugout," Sullivan said. Pat and the others did as they were told. After they settled in, he made a few notes on his clipboard and spoke again. "Now, I'm John Sullivan, head scout for the Orioles. We all met yesterday. And you remember Scotty Marshall. He's one of our players and will be helping out again today." Sullivan pointed over to Mutton Chops. Finally, Pat had a name to go with the guy's furry face. "Boys," Sullivan continued, "we have 2 spots that we're looking to fill on this team. 2 spots, and there are 12 of you here. So that means 10 of you won't be getting the call today. We want you to each do your best, and we thank you in advance for coming. Now I'm going to do a roll call. When you hear your name called, please say aye." Pat waited impatiently. Finally, after 10 other names were called, he heard his. Pat raised his hand and responded when required. He wondered if there was some extra significance to being called 11th out of 12 guys. He tried to keep the doubt out of his mind. It most likely meant nothing. "Now," Sullivan said, "we're going to try you boys out in the opposite order of the roll call we just read. So that means, Simpson, we're going to see you first. Please head over to the plate for hitting and bunting." Simpson, who was sitting closest to home plate, jogged out to take his place. Pat gulped. He would be going second out of 12. He hoped he would be able to stand out from the crowd. Pat got up and started to stretch his legs. He watched as Simpson grabbed a bat and took a few practice swings. Pat would at least be able to have some idea what to expect. He remembered Simpson from the first day of tryouts. He had a good swing and hit a few pitches deep into the outfield. "Now, Mr. Simpson, we want you to bunt and run to first base," Sullivan said. Simpson nodded. Mr. Mutton Chops Marshall went out to the mound to get ready to pitch. Another man in an Orioles jersey took the first base position, while a third crouched down behind home plate to catch. Marshall settled in on the mound and reared back. He unleashed a fast pitch toward home plate. Pat could have sworn the ball was literally smoking. Pop! The bat made contact with the ball, and the ball thunked down into the grass. Marshall sprinted from the mound to pick it up, while Simpson trotted over to first base. In one swift movement, Marshall picked the ball up with his right hand and hurled it over to the first baseman. It was really a beautiful display of fielding. The first baseman caught the ball, and about 2 seconds before Simpson reached the base. "Okay, thanks. Great job, Scotty. Mr. Simpson, thank you for trying out. You can go home." There was an audible gasp in the dugout. Simpson was being sent home? Pat was astonished. The tryout had only lasted about 45 seconds. He had done just exactly what Sullivan had asked him to do. Pat could hear the murmurs of the other 10 guys in the dugout, wondering what had just happened. Simpson looked totally confused as he stood next to first base. Sullivan gave him a glare and then turned to the men in the dugout. "Boys, this is a serious task we're trying to accomplish. We're looking for 2 professional baseball players. When I ask you to run to first base, I mean run to first base," he said. Pat was taken aback by how much Sullivan had emphasized that word, run. "Here in Baltimore, when you bunt, you still try to get a hit out of it," he continued. "But more importantly, here in Baltimore, our players have to listen to the instructions of their coaches." Sullivan turned to Simpson and kept on speaking. "Thank you, Mr. Simpson, but you didn't listen. I didn't ask you to jog out there and give up on the play. I asked you to run to first base. Next up is Arciano. Let's go, son." Pat immediately stood up as Simpson pleaded his case to Sullivan, but Sullivan wouldn't hear any of it. "We gave you a chance, Mr. Simpson. Again, we thank you for your time. Mr. Arciano, please go to home plate and grab the bat," Sullivan said, pointing to home. Pat ran over to the plate and did as he was told. Simpson sulked off the field, grumbling under his breath. Pat didn't bother taking any practice swings. He knew what he was going to be asked to do. "I will repeat this for you, Mr. Arciano, but please bunt and run to first base," Sullivan said. "Yes, sir," Pat yelled back. Sullivan shook his head and smiled. It was the first time Pat had seen him smile that evening. Pat settled into the plate. He lowered his head down. He slowly crouched and moved his hands into position on the bat. Mutton Chops moved his arms, kicked up his leg, and finished his delivery. The ball soared through the air. Pat quickly raised the bat, preparing for contact. The ball bounced off the bat, and Pat immediately started running. And then the story continues from there, but I'll stop there for now. Just wanted to take a few moments and say once again to please feel free to ask me any questions about the book. I'm going to start taking questions now. Thank you. I see a comment from Carol Amos. Thank you, Mrs. Amos. She says, you are so articulate in sharing your research. You make your former broadcast teacher extremely proud. Thank you very much. Mrs. Amos was my broadcast teacher in high school, so I'm very grateful. Thank you, Mrs. Amos, for that comment. I'm just scrolling up now. Yeah, here. I hope, Bud, that you've been able to get some sound. I see that you're having some issues. Thank you, Catherine, my cousin Kathy, for reading the book, and she said she enjoyed the reading. Thank you so much. Thank you to Chris, my mom, for her comment saying that she could hear as well. So I'll say again, please, if you have any questions, feel free to type them now in the comment box. I did receive a question earlier on from my cousin Diane, and Diane had mentioned to me that some of the characters in the book, their names have been changed. So almost all of the characters in Black Diamond Dreams were real people, loosely based on people in my family, including my grandparents. But I did change some of the names, and the reason why I changed names is because I wanted to emphasize that the book is fiction, not a nonfiction memoir. It's a fiction novel, so I wanted to emphasize that fact when writing the book. So that's why I changed a few names. Someone else had asked me, how long it took me to write the book. I started writing it last summer, in the summer of 2021. I started in mid-July, and I finished the first draft in October, November of 2021. So it took about 4 or 5 months to write a first draft, and then I revised and edited and just kept editing as much as I could until it was released at the end of January, early February. Something else I'd like to mention is how I got the idea for the book. In the beginning of the novel, the character that's based on me finds a scrapbook, and it's his grandfather's scrapbook. And in that scrapbook, there are all of these different newspaper clippings from baseball games. And he basically comes to discover that this scrapbook is his grandfather's book, and it's all of the stories and the history of his grandfather's baseball career, playing in high school and then for semi-professional baseball teams. So I was reading through my grandfather's actual scrapbook, and it had been the first time I had looked through this in many years. And I found that these teams that my grandfather played for and the teams that my grandfather played against, some of them were professional baseball teams, specifically professional Negro League baseball teams. And for anyone that doesn't know, in the late 1940s, early 1950s, Major League Baseball was integrated. Before that, Major League Baseball, professional baseball was segregated, so there were major league teams that we think of today, some of which are still in existence, like the Chicago Cubs, the Cleveland Indians, the Boston Red Sox. All of those teams were made up only of Caucasian players. But there was a separate league for African American athletes to play, made up exclusively of black players. And those teams had the names of, for instance, the Homestead Grays. And they were a team located in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Homestead is a neighborhood in Pittsburgh. The Homestead Grays played my grandfather's team. The Homestead Grays actually traveled to Fairmont, West Virginia to play a local baseball team that my grandfather played for. And when I learned that from reading the scrapbook this last time, the idea came into my head. Oh, wow, that is so interesting. I never knew that. I never learned learning local history in school, and I never learned taking West Virginia state history, that these professional Negro League teams came to Fairmont and came to communities all along the Monongahela River in northern West Virginia, as well as places in southern West Virginia. They came there to play. So I thought I should write a story about this. I should write a story about um, the coal mining baseball teams in northern West Virginia and the teams they played against. And I set that against the backdrop of this Italian family. That's how, it came about, essentially. So I wanted to make sure that I had mentioned that before taking comments and questions about the book. I'm looking now. Thank you. I see it. We started getting a few questions. A question. Thank you, Chris. What do you remember about your grandfather Pat's athletic prowess? Well, I remember, as I stated before, that he played several different sports. When I knew him as a young boy, my grandfather passed away. I was 14, and when I knew him, he was golfing. I would go golfing with him. He would golf. In the summer, he would take me golfing. He would golf, and I would just ride around in the golf cart with him and help him carry his clubs once in a while. But at that point, he was golfing, and he was a great golfer. He and his good friend, John, would go golfing every weekday morning. They would get up very early and go golfing at a local country club in Monongah. So I got to see him golf. And then also my grandfather was bowling when I was a young boy, and my grandfather taught me how to bowl. And he put me in bowling leagues, and every Friday he would pick me up from school when I was young, and I was going to Catholic school. He would pick me up from school on Friday afternoon, and he would take me to the local bowling alley, and we would bowl. He would teach me about bowling. We'd bowl a few games, and then we would go to McDonald's for dinner. And those are very, very cherished memories that I think about a lot. So at that point later in his life, he was golfing and bowling, but he did tell me a little bit when he was younger about his career playing basketball and baseball in high school. And in fact, this is an anecdote I love talking about from the book. At the very beginning of the book, when we meet Pat, it's the night of Pat's final high school home basketball game. And Monongah High School is playing Flemington High School. And there's a moment in the game when Pat has a breakaway toward the basket, and he's got the ball and he's reaching out toward the hoop, getting ready to shoot. And before he shoots, someone in the crowd yells out 2 points, meaning that person in the crowd knew Pat was going to make that shot. And sure enough, the basket went in and Pat got 2 points. That's actually based on a true story that my grandfather told me when I was a young boy about his basketball career, that there would be a man that would go to all of their home basketball games when my grandfather was at Monongah High School. Someone would go to those games and yell from the crowd 2 points every time my grandfather would go up for a layup, a basket. So that's something I wanted to put in the book. And I was glad that I did. I really enjoyed that little anecdote. And I hope that when you read that section, you enjoy it as well. So thank you for that question. I see we've got some more questions. Thank you. I'm going to try to catch up here to them. Diane, thank you. She's here, and she said, I'm thoroughly enjoying your reading. Just love the book. Thank you so much, Diane, for that comment. Catherine, my cousin Kate, thank you. She says, I love the way you brought Fairmont back alive for me. I could almost see the town and Grandma and Grandpa's house again. It brought back so many wonderful memories of our family. I love learning a little more about Grandpa's wine sales and processes. I wish I had his recipe for the wine itself. Thank you, Catherine. I wish so too. Unfortunately, I had to make up quite a bit of that part just from my own imagination. I remember my grandfather's brother, my Uncle Johnny, who is Luca in the book. when I was young, my Uncle John would come to visit Fairmont, and I would go around with him, and we would go to the cemetery to see where his parents, my great grandparents, are buried, and we would also go to the place where my great grandparents originally had their house. The house that I knew of growing up was not their original home. That was in a different part of Monongah that I think that house had been torn down from what my great uncle John had told me. So I never got to see that actual house. So I basically imagined, I thought about in my memory, or what would that house have looked like at the time for a working class Italian American family in Monongah, West Virginia. And I thought specifically about the radio. In the 1940s, the radio was a key element of social connection in homes across America, before television, of course, before the internet and computers. The radio was clearly king at one point. So I thought about what would some of the radio shows have been that they listened to. I knew that my great-grandfather was a big fan of Franklin Roosevelt, and I imagined in my head, I'm sure that I could just picture him, sitting next to the radio listening to President Roosevelt's fireside chats in the 1940s, especially after Pearl Harbor had been bombed. I would think about what that would have been like for my great-grandfather listening. I knew my great-grandfather smoked a pipe. I wanted to bring that into the book. So I thought, how about an image? Let's put a setting where he's sitting listening to the radio and smoking a pipe. Those were things that came to mind. So thank you, Kate, for your comment, because it really meant a lot to me. I really wanted to try to make it as accurate as possible to that time period. I thought about, would they have indoor plumbing? Most families would not have had indoor plumbing at the time. They would have had essentially outhouses. Would they have owned their home? A lot of families would not have owned their home because many families which were working in the coal mines, the coal mine operators owned many of those homes. The coal mine operators would have run a store in the town of Monongah, and they did actually. I learned that through my research. My family in the book, in Black Diamond Dreams, I write that my family would have owned their home, and one of the reasons why is because my great-grandfather in the book, he's selling wine on the side, essentially illegally, but that's helping him raise the money to be able to own his own home. Those were things that I thought about, and I wanted to make sure that they were accurate. Thank you, Mrs. Amos, for this question. The themes of your two books are so drastically different. How did you make such a dramatic transition? I wanted to write for this book, my second book. I actually was exploring a different idea, but when I saw my grandfather's scrapbook, which happened over the summer, when I saw those newspaper clippings, as I mentioned before, this light bulb literally just flashed in my head. And I thought, yes, baseball, coal mining, a family portrait, a family drama in the 1940s. These are all things that I'm really interested in. I really want to explore this. So I basically put everything else to the side and started writing. I started writing the very next day after I saw those newspaper clippings, and I kept writing as much as I could. It was one of those beautiful moments when lightning strikes and you just are filled with inspiration, filled with the fruits of inspiration and passion, and it takes you, to put pen to paper. And it was really a wonderful experience. So thank you so much for that question. Fazia, hi. Thank you for joining. Your new book is such a big departure from your last book, The Shortage. What made you decide to write about your family, and who or what was your inspiration? What made me decide to write about family was, well, I've always been fascinated by family. Family has always mattered a lot to me. And I grew up, I'm an Italian American, and that is a common thread in many Italian American families throughout our country. This idea of family, tradition, social connection, and sports was one way that my family socially connected. Another was music, which is also in the book. my grandfather and his brother, my great uncle, and their uncle, the three of them have a what you would call today a country western band, um, or maybe you could it's called folk or Americana music. Some people call it old time music, but they essentially had a band in real life back then that they would go around and play. And so these ideas of family and tradition and social connection were all elements that I've really thought a lot about and have always been, very inspirational to me. So that was really what made me decide to write about family. And also what was my inspiration was my grandfather, just thinking about my grandfather and his story. I was really determined to tell his story as much as I possibly could. Sorry. I was really determined to tell his story as much as I possibly could because I felt that there was a lot of unexplored family history there that I think was worth writing about. Thank you again for the question. Thank you to Fran. I really enjoyed your book and your reading. Very interesting book. Thanks for documenting this phase of West Virginia life. Thank you, Fran, so much. Catherine, that was some of the most delicious wine I have ever tasted. Talking about my great-grandfather's wine. Thank you for that comment. I wish I could have tried some. I did, however, about 4 years ago, I was cleaning out I was cleaning out a room in my grandparents' basement, in the house, my grandparents' house. And I found a jug of unopened wine that was sitting on this shelf in my grandparents' basement. It must have been sitting there for well over 20 years, maybe close to 30 years. And it had been sealed well enough. So my stepdad and I opened it and we drank some of it, and it was the best wine I've ever had. And I don't know who made it. I think it might have been made by my grandmother's brothers, who actually are also in the book. Deadeye, his name is Deadeye in the book. My great uncle Nicky, his name was Nick, made wine, the same as my great grandfather did too. And I think the wine that we found in the basement was actually some of his wine. So that was really exciting. I really enjoyed it. It was some of the best wine I ever had. Fran says, did you know that my grandparents lived in Monongah and very near your great-grandparents? My mother and your grandfather, Pat, went to the same high school. Then Pat was at my parents' wedding. Your Uncle John was the person who went to my grandmother's home to tell his family that my grandfather was killed in a mining accident. I did not know that, Francis. Thank you for telling me that story. I did not know that. And I wish I had known that before I wrote the book. I would have tried to incorporate some of that. But this anecdote that you tell shows, how important family was to these people. That family was really put above all else. And I think that that's true even today. I wonder, writing and researching this book, I wonder if of course, and this is hypothetical, but if one of the family members had killed someone, would the other family members have turned them in? I don't think so. I think that's how strong these family bonds were. That, it was family and loyalty to family above all else. And that was something that I was really trying hard to root for and write about in this book. I wanted to emphasize that. If anyone else has any other questions, please feel free to write them in the chat box. I'm just looking here quickly to try to make sure I'm caught up on all the questions. Okay, I think I am. Just going to scroll down and see if we have anything else. Okay. I don't see any other questions, so I'm going to leave it there. But I wanted to thank each and every one of you so much for coming today to listen to my reading and Q&A about Black Diamond Dreams. This book means a lot to me. and it's very personal to me. And I hope that if you have read it, that you enjoyed it, and I'm hoping that if you haven't read it, that you consider reading it. Black Diamond Dreams is available now on Amazon in ebook for $5.99. It's also available in paperback for $12.99 right now, and it's free if you have Kindle Unlimited. Oh, I do see I have another question here. Thank you, Mrs. Amos. She asks me, do you have your next project in mind? I'm going to be, hopefully, I do have a few ideas, not ideas for a novel, but ideas for a few short stories that I would like to write. I have a few, I have an idea for a short play that I would like to write. Um, Hopefully, at some point, I will write another novel. But as of right now, I don't have an idea for another novel. But we'll see what happens. And again, thank you so much for coming. I hope you enjoyed this reading of Black Diamond Dreams and have a wonderful afternoon. Thank you.